We need regime change at the Fed. It's not just about a person. It's about an approach to economics. It's about approach to what they're doing. And I'm troubled when I see them moving the goalposts. It is very puzzling to me, Becky, how you could think that we should do emergency rate cuts last September, and now all of a sudden you stand there like a hawk. That's not good for the institution. I don't think it's good for the economy to be changing the goalposts like that.
If you've ever wondered why the Federal Reserve seems inept or even part of the problem, this video is for you. Former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh doesn't hold back. He explains how outdated thinking at the Fed has punished wage growth, enabled inflation, and prioritized Wall Street over the real economy, the one that affects us the most. His message? It's time for regime change, not just new leadership, but a new mindset.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
If I were the president, what I'd be worried about is a central bank that doesn't see any of that. A central bank that is stuck with models from 1978, governance from a prior period, and don't recognize we could be at the front end of a productivity boom. And if I were the president, I'd be worried that they might not see it. And they might think economic growth is somehow going to be inflationary. I think we were probably in the early innings of a structural decline in prices. Ken sees it on the front lines of real businesses. And I think if you look over the period of the next year or two, it's a pretty special moment.
While real businesses are seeing a productivity boom, the Fed is still fretting like it's 1978. Economics for dummy translation, the Fed thinks rising wages is a threat, but reckless government spending, that's great. Lest we forget what the Fed did in 2021.
Experience means there are times to be dovish and times to be hawkish. I'll give you one example of a time to be hawkish. 2021, 2022, interest rates were zero. The Fed was buying $100 billion of assets every month. Payrolls were going up by 500,000. Congress was spending $5 trillion. And what did this group say? This group then said it's all transitory. So I don't know. There's a time for a bird to change his feathers, and it's with the times. It has nothing to do with who's president.
Anyone ever said, just shut up, listen, and learn? Because I said that to myself.
That moment didn't just age poorly, it shattered credibility. And this wasn't a one-off. Warsh says the credibility crisis runs deep.
The broad conduct of monetary policy has been broken for quite a long time. The central bank that sits there today is radically different than the central bank I joined in 2006. I don't think we need policy continuity that brought about the greatest mistake in macroeconomic policy in 45 years, that divided the country, that caused a surge in inflation. I don't think we need continuity when the central bank doesn't have credibility. Last September, Becky, as you'll recall, the Fed cut interest rates 100 basis points, 50 basis points before the election, 50 basis points after. Inflation was 50% higher then than it is now. And what did the bond market do when they cut rates? Long rates went up 75 basis points.
But rather than admit their failures, the Fed did what any good bureaucracy does. They pointed fingers.
I think the Fed has done a very good job of blaming others for their mistakes. It's been very popular to blame the president because he's being so mean to them. Well, most of the Fed's mistakes are because of choices they've made. They've done a very good job in the business of politics. The inflation that has done huge harm to the American people. First, they blamed Vladimir Putin. It was because of the war. Then what did they do next? They blamed the pandemic. Supply chains, they would say.
Well, supply chain was legit for a lot of inflationary.
Well, it changed the level of prices because that's what happens in a market economy. But that's not what inflation is. Inflation is what happens to the Fed. The Fed is responsible for inflation. The Fed makes a choice about inflation, and the problem is the Fed has made that choice poorly. So they've got someone new to blame for all these mistakes, and a lot of their co-conspirators in the media seem to believe it. The new mistake is the reason why they're not doing the right thing on rates is because of the president and those tariffs.
Well,
he's being so mean to them.
I will say changing
but
the
that's
goalposts.
That's not the cause of inflation. The Fed controls.
Here's the root of the problem. The Fed is still using a theory of inflation that blames you for getting a raise.
What the Fed needs is more robust discussion of ideas, less groupthink. I don't like it that everyone's following the same models. To give you just one simple example, the dominant models at the Fed, which might have been the best models there were in 1978, what do they think, Andrew? They think inflation comes if the economy runs too hot and workers get paid too much. That's not my view. I think we could use a new idea, a new theory of inflation, so let me practice one for you.
Okay.
Inflation happens when the government prints too much, spends too much, and lives too well. That theory that money has something to do with monetary policy, is nowhere in the central thinking at the Fed.
So, okay, what does reform actually look like? Warsh says it starts with getting the Fed out of the business of pumping up Wall Street and back to serving Main Street.
The real reason why we can begin reform at the Fed with a rate cut, which is just a first step to regime change, is if you look outside this window, financial markets, financial conditions, they are hot. IPO markets are back. Credit spreads are narrow. SPACs are back. Financial conditions are very loose here. What about the real economy? It's the real economy I talked to Ken Langone about. We're near a housing recession. Real households, first-time home buyers, small businesses, they're having a hard time getting credit. So at the same time, what can we do? Take a little of this looseness out of financial markets by getting the Fed out of the fiscal business, out of the political business, shrink that, and then redeploy some of that liquidity to people that need it most in the real economy. I think the Fed has the balance wrong. A rate cut is the beginning of the process to get the balance right. A strong real economy is what we need, so this can be a golden age.
And now, in the most ironic twist of all, the same Fed that failed Main Street in exchange for Wall Street profits says it can't cut rates. Why? Because Trump's America First agenda might benefit?
Sound right, boys.
Let me get this straight. The Fed ignored collapsing banks, slept through inflation, but now they're clutching their pearls because economic growth that helps the working class is suddenly a threat. Basically, 1978 called, and they want their failed Fed economic policies back. Don't you think it's time to prioritize the American working class over Wall Street bubble assets? Pun absolutely intended. Hey, look, if curated content makes it a bit easier to filter out the noise, like and subscribe. It means a lot to this channel. I'm Brian Tuttermore with today's Faith Check News. And remember, think right to live free.